the same completely different viewpoints about technology that we have about Brexit. And that's quite an important thing to understand, because how do people arrive at the conclusions they arrive at? And that's what we're going to explore in the next 25 minutes. So can I just check, Lillian, our online folk, they can all hear now? That's all working well, that's great. Okay, so I'd like you to follow along with this. So if you have a mobile device or a phone, a tablet or a laptop, can you please go to the address that's on the screen? And that's equally true for our UK audience. Because if you go to that, you will be on the same resource. And there are a number of activities that I want you to take part in this short session. What I've looked at is creating 3 rules. I try to think about everything that I know about using technology in teaching and learning. And I started using technology in teaching and learning back in the mid-1990s. So probably some people in this room weren't born when I started using technology. And that makes me feel very old. And I've learned a lot from talking to people like yourselves, because so often it's very easy to get the wrong emphasis, get the wrong focus when we're talking about using technology to make teaching more inclusive. So what I want to do is I boiled down everything that I've learned since 1995 into 3 rules, three rules. The 3 rules of using technology to make teaching more inclusive. And here they go. So, first rule. The first rule is to forget about technology. And that's a problem that many, many people fall into. They think, I need to use technology, or I'm wanting to use technology, or my principal, my head mistress, my headmaster say we must use technology, so let's think about what we need to do. And that is entirely the wrong way to start. If you want to do technology well, you must think about anything but technology. You must start thinking about what are the experiences that you want to give to your students. And so here are some examples. And when I was working with staff, with colleagues in the college where I was teaching, one of the first things that I did with them is I sit down and say, tell me about your course. Tell me about the bits of your course that are very boring for the students. And tell me the bits of your course that are boring for you as a teacher. Tell me what you want to do. And so we gave some examples, like the examples on the screen here. So one example is, I want to give my students more case studies, more examples, so that they have choices. I want to give them more variety. I used to teach about volcanoes and earthquakes and exciting things like that. But always I found, because I had a limited amount of time in the class, I would teach about my favorite volcano. And then I realized that some of my students were going abroad, going to Vesuvius or going to different countries where there were volcanoes. And if I taught about a volcano that they knew about, suddenly that would be much, much more relevant to them, and they would engage with me. And so I found that by talking to teachers about what you want to do, about giving more examples, giving more variety, and giving more responsibility to the students, that was helpful. And also making information simpler. The hardest thing, and Inga, I think, is talking about this later, differentiation. The hardest thing with a group of anybody, the hardest thing with me now, with all of you, is that some of you know lots more about the subject than others. Some of you know more about some of this than I do, because you've got experiences I haven't got. So how can we give different levels of information for different people? How can we give different media so that somebody that really learns very well from video can use video, and somebody that learns really well from a list of bullet points can have a list of bullet points? How can we have alternative activities? How can we help students practice? I loved setting tests for my students. partly because I was nasty and horrible and I made them work very hard. But actually, the reason I loved setting them tests is because I knew the more I tested them, the more they began to understand and to remember and to tie different things together in their heads. But what I hated about giving them lots and lots of tests was that I ended up doing lots of marking till late in the evening every night. And so suddenly, when I realized technology could give me ways of giving them lots of skills to practice, that made technology exciting for me because it saved me work. And it made it good for the students because I could give the feedback in the quizzes that meant they were having a conversation with me. So that instead of just, yes, you got this right, it would be, you got this right because, or you got this wrong because. And suddenly the student was knowing me. They were hearing my voice, not literally, although you could do it literally if you wanted nowadays. But the student was getting a sense of that's what Alistair would say. So let's have a look at what this means in practice. That's rule number one. I've got some examples, and you can follow these in your own time. And each of the examples that we've got is part of a learning journey that we are doing as part of the Future Teacher project. But before I go and show you our examples, I want to get the wisdom from you. And so I want you just to talk, to go onto this link. If you haven't got a device and you haven't got that link to this resource, then just have a look at people around you. You can talk to each other for a few minutes. What do you want students to experience? And so for our UK audience as well, try, if you're on the UK audience, don't try typing onto my screen. Make sure you go onto that link, and perhaps Lillian could put the link in there again for them. So what do you want students to experience? What experiences of those different things we've talked about, what are the most important ones for you? And if you have found a way of meeting that with technology, then put that in there as well. If you haven't, just say, this is what I really want my students to do, and we'll see what sort of things you come up with. So just type in there, you've got 250 characters. You can type in Dutch, that's fine. I will translate the page with Google Translate, which will probably be amusing. So feel free to type in Dutch. Obviously, our English people, you don't have to type in Dutch. But and then I'm going to have a look at the answers as they come in. And you can go onto the answer page once you've submitted, or you can go back and submit something else. So wanting students to have success, can do things in their own way. I like that idea of listening and playing with language, sounds and meaning, learning from each other's experiences. Yep, those are excellent. Collaboration, working together, exactly what we're doing at the moment. The pleasure of learning. I like that bit. I'm a storyteller myself, and we'll talk about this in the session on online learning. We'll talk about storytelling and tapping into emotions. So let's see if I can. Oh, a quick Google Translate, and then you can tell me if Google works. It didn't work on that one. Maybe it'll work on the whole page. So these are brilliant. Keep going and keep Dutch language coming as well. Thank you. Oh, Google Translate's not working on Mentimeter, so that's interesting. It works really well on Padlet. I should have stayed with Padlet. But these are great, brilliant. And many of those you can accomplish using very, very simple technologies. But that's why you need to start not thinking about technology, but thinking about what you want to experience with the students. So we've got lots of things coming in there. Really good things coming in there, and it sounds to me from looking at some of those that some of you have also started practicing this, started putting this into practice. That's important because over the next 2 days, if you're here for today and tomorrow, talk to other people, talk to people about what you have done, what you know. Don't just think that you've come here to listen to people at the front talking. The real wisdom in this room and the real wisdom online at the moment is all the different people sharing experiences. So these are brilliant. I'm really pleased with those. Thank you very much for taking part in that. And keep them going in if you want. Just here are some examples from the Future Teacher sessions. Each of these is from one of the different Future Teacher sessions that we've done. So this is alternative explanations or differentiation. So this is a resource that we used when we were talking about doing webinars. And we set up Ron, Lillian and myself did a screenshot of our own setup, our own room where we do webinars, so that people might say, no, my room doesn't look like that. I'll look at Lillian's room or Alistair's room, and they could click through and see the different areas. They didn't have to read everything. They could only read the bits that were important to them if they wanted to. So that's giving us differentiation and alternative pathways. This is from this is from our online learning, where we were looking at what is it that makes learning stick in the brain, brain-based learning. And again, people can look through this, and if they know everything about, maybe choices or connectedness, but they think emotional, what's the emotional content of learning? They can just click on that. So these are examples where people can just take the pathways they need. Here's other examples, very simple quiz ones. I won't bother doing those, but you can do them in your own time if you wanted to. More importantly, with some quiz tools, I can get the results from lots of people. So as a teacher, I can use materials there. I can use a range of different media. In all our Future Teacher resources, we've got different media. We've got video clips, we've got audio, we've got activities, and so on. Differentiation we talked about already. In our groups, when we were delivering these online, we often had people that at one end of the spectrum were academic researchers, and so they weren't interested in an overview of one or two kind of simple articles, like a blog post. They wanted to know all about successful projects. They wanted to know how it differed in different countries, in what's the experience of using social media in Africa compared to in Europe, where you have obviously very different backgrounds and things. So we could do that. We could have a range of people from complete beginners to real experts, and yet everybody join in, because we had differentiation, because of that range of different resources. But rule 2, there's only 3 rules, so we're already halfway through, which is great, and we're speeding up too. So rule 2 about using technology to make teaching more inclusive is don't think about teaching. And what I mean by that is teaching is often not what we want it to be. One of the main reasons I started using technology, because I do not like technology myself. If you came to my home and you looked at all the gadgets that Alistair uses, you would find very few. And I don't watch the television. I don't watch videos. I like to be outdoors. I like to be in my kayak or walking my dog. But I found that I could do so many things differently, because I spent a lot of my time photocopying handouts to give to students and then handing them out at the start of the lesson and collecting them back at the end, and then realizing some had gone missing or some had been broken and the pages were torn. I explained the same thing often to 3 or 4 people in the group. They would say, I didn't understand this, and I'd go and talk to them. And then somebody else, could you explain this? And I found I was wasting time. I was trying to teach, and it was going wrong, because I was spending more time on things that were not valuable. So I began to try to not teach. I began to try to do less for the students. So here's an example. I planned to give you some good case studies. Go back to the idea about different volcanoes. I had thought to myself, if I stay for a couple of hours in the evening, I could get lots of case studies together. And then I thought, no, I'll have a lot of fun collecting lots of case studies, and my wife might have a lot of fun having me out for the evening. But actually, what I really realized was that if I gave the student the task of collecting lots of case studies and then we put them all in a document which then we turned into a web page, if they had to collect the case studies, I had a much bigger range of case studies, but I could also make it really important learning by getting them to explain why the one that they chose is a good case study. I wanted to make quizzes, but then I thought, actually, if they design their own quizzes, all the learning is taking place there. And it means that I'm including different students. So the dyslexic students that want a quiz that's not got lots of words in it, but has pictures in it, well, that's great. That's what they made. They made things that suited them. And field trips, making video summaries of a field trip to help students remember what you covered, or a practical session. I realized that they all had hundreds of pictures on their cameras. And what was much more valuable was saying to them, okay, get in groups of 4, look at the pictures that you took today, or the pictures you took on the practical, and I want you to create just 4 pictures with 30-second audio clip for each of them. Suddenly, you have a task that involves no writing, unless they wanted to write a script beforehand, that is perfect for many students who have problems with reading or writing. It was based on the media that they could use, that they preferred, and it was very quick. And I also got some really good information from the students. And even mind maps. When I created a mind map to summarize the course, it wasn't anything like as useful in terms of the learning that took place when I told the students to create their own mind maps, to sit in 2s or 3s, create mind maps. And forgetting about teaching and thinking about learning is really important for being inclusive, because when the learners take responsibility themselves, they begin to use examples that make sense to them. Here's another example we did where this was writing based, but we had some people putting in images as well. A collaborative example. So we were much more inclusive by focusing not on teaching and what I did, but by focusing on what I wanted them to do. And they ended up creating resources that suited their level of understanding, the media they prefer, and so on. And the last one is the rule 3. It's model good learning. And this is the challenge to all of us, particularly if you are not naturally somebody that likes technology, which was the position I was in. You model good learning by going beyond your comfort zone, because if you think about it, that is what students have to do every day. Now, I like teaching in a particular way. When I was working in the classroom, I had colleagues who liked teaching in different ways. And if the student was with the teacher that liked teaching in a way that they didn't really get on with, that was very difficult. But students just have to get on and do it. That's what we expect of a student. You learn. You might not like the teacher, but you learn. Well, I think the same applies to us. Many of us don't like technology because it makes us feel vulnerable. We expect to be experts. We are experts in the things we know about. And then somebody says, I'd like you to use technology with your students. And I'm not expert in that. It makes me vulnerable. But I should be modeling that vulnerability to my students. I should be modeling a willingness to learn. And so here, we need to think beyond our comfort zones. And on the left-hand side, there's just a little model, and what I call the onion model of inclusion, which I put together for an event recently. And when people design learning materials, if you design learning materials for people like yourself, you end up benefiting a small number of people in the middle. If you design learning materials for people like yourself and the people that you know, and you think, oh yes, actually I know somebody that that really hates lots and lots of text on a page, so maybe I'll put a few images on, then it's a bigger group of people. The real challenge is to go to the outside edge of the onion, where you're talking about, I'm designing something that's for people like me, but also for people not like me. And on the right-hand side here, we can see these are the main inclusion issues for lots of students. It's that I don't read confidently. I'm not like you. I'm not like a teacher. I can't read quickly. I don't write confidently. If you are a teacher, you probably do some of those things, maybe most of those things, very well, which is why you are now a professional. But many of your students are disorganized. They miss lessons because of ill health or anxiety. And all those people need resources that can support them, even if they're very different from what you are. So, in summary, forget technology if you want to use technology to make teaching more inclusive. Forget teaching if you want to make teaching more inclusive, and get uncomfortable, get outside the comfort zone. And the last quote I want to end with, before I ask you, I'm going to ask you to give a quote in a minute, but the last quote that I want to end with is this. It's not by a famous person, it's just a quote that I made up myself, but I think it sounds quite good. And if you want to use it in Dutch, then you're very welcome. And this is it: technology does not make poor teachers better. I have seen some terrible technology enhanced lessons. They were just as bad with technology as they were without. But what it does do is it gives good teachers 100 ways of helping students to be better learners. Lots more ways. So what I'd like you to do on the resource that you're following along with, and perhaps Lillian, if you can pop that link in again, if I could ask you to do that, or Ron, that would be great. I'd like you just to tell each other what one thing you'll take away from this very short session. We've got 3 minutes left. What one thing have you thought? And it might be, I thought this was helpful because I hadn't thought of that before. Or it might be, I liked it when he said this because I already do it and it's confirmed for me that I've got some good practices. So whether it's something new or confirming something, or maybe you've got something even better, which is, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I've got a much better idea that I would have put in that presentation that people really need to know about. Put that in as well. That's helpful. So while you're doing that, I'm going to have a look at the final slide. And this is for our English friends as well, and our Scottish and Irish and Welsh friends. Dare to experiment. I love it. Great rules, right? And there's only 3 of them, so it should be easy to remember. Going beyond comfort zones. Yeah, goals focused. So that's great. Keep those coming in. Be vulnerable. Yeah, that's a really important one there. So for our audience abroad as well, I think Ron's just given me a link, so I'm trying to find the text chat. Let me find the text chat. So we're going to do a translation. Is that right? Here we are. There's a link in the text chat. We've got lots of chats coming in there. There's a private one for me. Thank you. Sorry, I can't yet. Okay, yeah. So if we click on that Mentimeter one there, let's see, and this should be a translated version. So after, well, it was all in English to begin with. Oh right, right, excellent. You might need to come up and I can only translate to English. Oh, look at that. How kind. Thank you. I don't think I'm working this properly, Ron. If you want to come and do it, that's great. I'm going totally beyond my comfort zone. The technology's gone way beyond me now. That is the end from me. So thank you very much. And hopefully we might see some of you in some of the other sessions. Have a great 2 days. Ron, come and speak to me properly because I can't hear. Oh yes, yeah, we do that. We're going straight up to an inclusivity session now. I didn't want to steal that from everybody else. What to do with students who don't know the technology? That's a really important point. Perhaps we should end on, because I think there are some really important questions about how competent our students are at using technology. And one of the important things about that is, where are they going to learn to use technology in a way that's effective for them if we don't do it? So I think Anik's question is a really good question, but I think the answer I would put back to you, which is, the more you are using technology, and often in very simple ways, the more confident the students will be and the more competent they will become. So thank you very much to our audience in the UK. That's it. And thank you to our audience in Brussels. And let's get on with the show. Thank you.
We are going now to the rules. Maybe it's all in your goodie bag, the overview, but I maybe show you the way to the rules. For the session, differentiation is in Dutch. You can follow Inge and Mathieu. To the room, Jan van de Restbroek. You go stairs left, and then it's first room, double door in the first room. And for the session Hero Rizala, the Future Teacher Project, you can follow me. I'm going to that session. And for the inclusive session is in the room CAT-TE, it's on the stairs on your right. First room on your right, second room on your right. There will be also Sarah, but you can follow around Alistair and